bit big, so sometimes it's hard to focus on. I can make it a little bit bigger. Yep.
You can see it's a gray screen right now.
Stop sharing. Let me try this one more time.
We were just talking about how technology doesn't always love us, so.
That's all right. Well, and I was jumping from one meeting to the other, so it may be looking. Let's see. Share. Not the Zoom meeting. Aha. Google Chrome. There we go.
There it is.
All right. Cool. All right. So today we're going to go over a little bit of IRB. So if you guys are ready, we can go ahead and get started. So we have a brand new system called IRIS, Information Research Security System. And so one of the first websites, and I'm going to copy this and put it in our chats for you guys. There you go. Is to learn about IRIS. And so we're going to kind of do a little twofold, a little bit IRB, kind of some of the regs and what you have to look out when you're doing research involving human subjects, and a little bit of the software. So we'll get you started with the software. So if you guys want to click on the link, you're welcome to open up a web, Google Chrome, or whatever your web browser is, and follow along. But the first step you want to do is to log on here and do a login to IRIS. And that basically clicks you into the system and logs you in. And when you log in through SSO, you're going to automatically have an account created for you. So this is going to be absolutely necessary as your first step, because when we get into the application, they're going to assign you your application, or you're going to start your application, and you're going to have to tell the system who your peeps are, who's a part of your research team. So everyone as part of the research team will need to have an IRIS account. So first step, you can do that now. You're welcome to start, is to click here, log into IRIS. Now I'm already logged in. It'll take you through SSO. Once you kind of put in your credentials, do the duo. I think that should be like a TikTok dance. Do the duo. Once you sign in, you'll actually come here to a page that looks like this. And as you guys are trying it, if you're following along and you have issues, just give us a shout out on the chat as well. All right. So once you're logged in to IRIS, this basically becomes your dashboard. And your investigator dashboard is sort of all things you need to know about the IRB, and it's going to track all your submissions. So there's a couple of tasks at the beginning. We'll create a new protocol. If you're doing an amendment of an existing protocol, you'll do a submission form or your annual check-in. You can view your study submissions, track your approvals, and if you have any pending submissions. Now this happens to be my test account when I do training, but if you want to find and look up a protocol, you can use that. But as you scroll down all the way to the bottom, here's everything you've submitted. So if you've got more than one submission, they'll show up here. And another key part of this is the protocol status. So this little guy will change as you go through the submission process. So these are brand new. These are my tests that I do during training. I'm sorry, does someone have a question? Was that a question? I kind of heard.
I think someone's microphone was just on.
Okay, thanks. So the protocol status here can change as you go through the workflow. So right now, all these are in draft, meaning I'm just getting my submission set up. As you hit submit, it'll go orange to say pending. Once an analyst, meaning someone in my office, is assigned and is reviewing it, if they have changes requested, it'll go to changes requested. So it'll sort of stay orange as we're going back and forth in the process of a review. Finally, once you get approved and your approval letter is issued, it's green. Green means go. So don't do any research procedures until your protocol status hits green and you either get an approved letter or an exempt determination letter. So green means go. Otherwise, it's non-compliance. You cannot start any research procedures before you get your IRB approval. So if you're always wondering, where's my submission? What's going on? This is a good place, your protocol status, to check. You can also click on history. Now these submissions are brand new, but as you kind of go through the review process, this gets filled in and will show you exactly what happened, all the correspondence in and out, how long it's taking in that history tab. Forms, if you're doing amendments of existing forms, this is how you do an amendment, annual check-in, study closures, a reportable event form. If something goes wrong, you have to tell the IRB. So those are the submission forms as it relates to your protocol. You can hide it if you don't want to see this on your list, copy it to start a new one, or delete. So that kind of is your action items for a submission. Now we're going to start, I'm going to use a draft one, but if you're going to create one for new, which again, you're welcome to do and follow along, just hit create new protocol. What it does is it opens up a submission and it's going to assign you an IRB number. That's just our reference number. So if you're emailing and corresponding, it's always good to give us that number. I have over 300 studies. I can't remember them all. But if you give me this reference number, I can quickly look it up, see what you're seeing, and answer any questions you have. So that's a good thing to know as well. So let's dive into one of our submissions here. All right, so this happens to be a submission. There's kind of two parts to the submission process. First is your application. And this is where we ask lots of questions and figure out kind of what you're doing. It's the protocol, basically. And then you get to the submission packet, and that's where you're going to attach things. You're going to give me consent forms, recruitment material. If you're doing a survey, you're going to give me survey questions. If you're doing focus group questions, all that other good stuff. That is the rest of the protocol. So we're going to start with the form. Real easy. We start out easy and then get harder. The first question is, give me your study title. So my study title here. All right, and then it has a study alias on that workspace. It just has the short form. My favorite one is Stella. My chair used to yell Stella in the middle of the meeting on the minutes, which was always fun. So you can name it whatever. It's just a short title is your study alias. How to go, kind of walk through this form is the save and continue to the next section. Now, because I've already done this, these things will open up, and think of this as like chapters in your book. So as you progress through, it'll open up all of the sections. If you answer different things, it's smart form is what it's called. It'll branch. So if you change the submission type, then it'll route you into a different form, and the sections look different. All right, next one is another easy one. This is setup department. My department happens to be the Office of Research Compliance, so it defaults that. But if I need to add another department, I can just add select here. So just put in your major or whatever your department is. If you want to delete or remove a department, you just select and you can delete. So whatever department your faculty belongs to, there's also a student engagement department. So if you do department name, student, if it's a student account, you can select that one as well. If you have more than one department, just select which one's primary. So this is mainly student. I can do it like that. And then we do save and continue. All right. So I talked about logging in an account. Here's where it comes into play. So assign key study personnel. What you're doing here is you're telling the system who to grant access to, right? Because you don't want to grant it to all of our, faculty, staff, and students across the whole campus. These are you telling me who's on your study. And it will nicely actually check your training. Okay. So if you have research staff that are being added to your study and you want to know if they're compliant with training, click the little graduation hat, and green means good. I've done my training. You can add me with confidence and it won't hold you up. If it's red, this is our diver training, but if it's red, if any of these are red like this, then they're not good in training. And they have to take one of three. I happen to have them all just because of my role, but it's one of three. So any of these in this section, if one of those is green, all good. So what training do I need? If you go back to our IRB website, IRB training, and this will tell you how to get into training. Pop that in the chat as well. Chat right here. Somewhere. It's hidden. There you are. Okay. So that is our training. So we do training online through WebEx, or sorry, through Citi. So you can click here to access Citi. So if you're preparing a research study, go ahead and get the training done. It's not a quick one. Most people report between 8 to 10 hours. And it's giving you the history, the why, what we're looking for. It's a good overview of human subjects and ethics required. But you want to make sure you're done. I cannot release your approval letter until all your study staff members have completed training. So if you see someone who's red and you're adding them to your study, gently remind them to get their study done, their training done, so that you can get your study in. Okay. So once you're done, you just close it and it goes back here. If you want to add more people, look them up. Let's add Larry is in my office. He probably won't have IRB training. He does not. So it would be red for him. Another thing is when you select the role, so if he's an additional investigator for me, I'm gonna put him as a co-investigator. If you want that person to get the same notices of the PI, you'll hit yes here. So you get to control what notices go out. Okay. And then once he's on, he'll be added here as additional investigators. All right, once you get all your people added, close protocol setup. So the folks that need to be listed here are anyone who's recruiting, consenting, interacting, intervening with your subjects, collecting any identifiable data. Rule of thumb, if they're going to be listed on the publication, chances are they're engaged in research. So the question is, do we need to add all members of our dissertation committee? No, but you cannot be PI. So your main faculty mentor should be the one listed as PI. So when you save and continue, oops, sorry, rank you personnel, set up protocol personnel. If my faculty member happens to be Dr. Oliver, select, I can make her the PI. So any student application that comes in where the student is listed as PI will automatically be returned, not reviewed. Only a faculty member can be the PI. You would need to list yourself as a student investigator as other additional investigators like this. But it's not all the members of the dissertation. It's just any faculty member who's responsible for overseeing your interactions, who's going to help you consent, see identifiable data, do any recruitment, any of that good stuff. Okay. Does that answer your questions? All right, section 4. This is a major branching. So what's shown here is the IRB application. I know I'm interacting, intervening, or getting identifiable data from humans, and I know I'm doing research, so it's an IRB application. If you're unsure, then you can select human subjects here, human research determination, and ask us to say, hey, is this research? Is it involving human subjects? Do I even need IRB review? So if I selected this option, watch my left-hand side here, you notice all that change and it gave you a little warning, and now it's going to route you down a different form to say, are you really involving research and are you really involving human subjects? And the outcome is going to be 3 things. No, it's not research. No, it's not human subjects. Therefore, you don't need IRB review. Or yes, it is, and you need IRB review, and we'll ask you to come back into the submission type, hit IRB application, and continue from there. And again, my routing will change because I've changed a major branching point. Okay. Any questions so far there? Keeps getting in. All right, so far so good. All right, here we go. So now we get into the IRB application. We kind of did some intro stuff, some setup stuff. It pre-populates who you listed as PI. And here we need to know of your team members, do they have a conflict of interest? This means a financial interest. So typically, if I own stock in Pfizer, Pfizer's funding my study, I might have, want my research data to look really good. So Pfizer stock goes up, so I financially benefit. That's generally a conflict of interest. So you will add your people by selecting the drop down here, and if they have a conflict, yes or no. If you need to add more than one, click here, and the tabs will populate, and then you add the next person. Make sure everyone added in 3.0, I had 3 people in my sample, are all listed and conflicts are declared. If you're missing someone, so I check 3.0 and I check here and I make sure everyone's there, you will get sent back for changes requested. So this is an easy thing to avoid. Just make sure you put everyone in 3.0 and everyone here has a tab and their conflicts declared. All right. Now we kind of get into what would be the protocol. So section 6.0 is going to be the purpose and rationale of your study. So this is basically your study objectives or your study hypothesis. Very succinctly, very clearly, what are you trying to accomplish? And then below, you're going to tell me your background. What's been done before you? Why is this question a pending question? And why is it really important to add to the existing knowledge? Why should we be doing this study? That's what you're trying to communicate here. Why is it really important to put subjects at risk to accomplish this, to get the information that we need? Okay, so that's section 3.0. We do review the rest of your application. I would recommend coming back here to make sure your objectives match the rest of your study. Because as you're developing the study, sometimes you can kind of go this way, and really make sure that the data that you're collecting and the people that you're collecting it on makes sense for your objective. Let me give you a good example. If your study objective is to find out how certain procedures impact athletes, right, student athletes, but your subject population only includes male athletes, you're going to get a response requested because females can be athletes too. If your objective is to review all athletes, why aren't you including females in your subject population? That would be a question we would pose back. So make sure your objective matches what data you're collecting and that you're able from the data being collected to answer the question asked, or you might need to revise the question. And the subject population is able to give you the data to answer your question. And if those things don't match up, then consider either revising your procedures or subject populations or revising your study objective. Collaborations. So 3.0, we put all the TAM-UCC folks. Once they're in 3.0, they get the application on their dashboard. They can help you edit it. They see what you see. But you might have friends outside the TAM-UCC family. And so do you have collaborators? If you answer yes, you'll give us information about your collaborator. They may need IRB approval at their home institution. Our IRB covers our TAM-UCC family, our faculty, staff, and students, but it doesn't cover someone at University of Bedrock, as Fred Flintstone is a part of, and you can also click and add more. So we will ask you questions about how they are ensuring IRB at their institution. For a lot of our student projects, the answer will likely be no, and then it just goes away. Funding, is your study funded? If yes, click here, find the sponsor, add more information. If no, it goes away. All right, other committee approvals. 99.9%, this is no, but every once in a while, you may have a study that involves another IRB study. So it's not, don't hit this one if you're referencing the one you're trying to fill out. A good example is we may have a repository. So in engineering, there's a repository of autonomous vehicle data. And your study may be asking that repository for data that you want to pull out and analyze. Well, that repository has your consent documents and an IRB approval. So you would relate that IRB repository number to your study. Another good example is if for IBC, that's biohazards. So if your study involves collecting blood from participants, then that would also involve IBC. A biohazard is a bloodborne pathogen. And so you would have to relate and get IRB approval and IBC. So again, probably for the most part, it's going to be none, but that's what that is referring to. All right, section 10. So this is another huge branching section, and it's good to get it right. Based on what you answer, it will open up different questions. So a lot of folks will do interview procedures, focus groups, questions, but if you're also going to record, say focus group, you want to make sure you select recording. So make sure you select everything that you're doing related to your subjects. And then you're going to describe and give a very detailed step-by-step. This is basically the protocol. In our Investigator Resources tab, if you want to see like what a protocol might look like, we do have in Word protocol templates. So there's a couple of them. You're welcome to download these, kind of walk through and then fill out the form. Because we're going to be checking for consistency between what you tell us of the procedures and other things like your consent processes, your data collection processes, and the like. So here, step by step, take it one, what are you doing? Okay, I'm going to do a focus group of who? Of students. I'm going to get that, they're going to get a link, they're going to consent, I'm going to get their data, I'm going to put their data in Qualtrics, I'm going to download that data out of Qualtrics, store it on my computer, analyze it using the software, and then answer my questions. So you want to make sure everything's clear. If you've got multiple populations, make sure you address what's going to happen with population 1 versus what's going to happen with population 2 if those procedures are different. So the more details you can provide here, the better. If you've got some non-research things leading up to your research project, clearly define what's not research versus research. So a good example is there might be a community event going on, right? It's, Buck Days or whatever is going on. And so that really has nothing to do with research, but that's where you're going to show up and find your study participants. So if the event happened, tell us about, hey, this is an event. It routinely occurs. It's happening in the community. That's not a part of research, but those who attend, we're going to ask them to do a survey. So then focus on that survey as your research procedures. All right, tell us the duration. So if you're doing a survey, it's 15 minutes, and also an interview, that's an hour. This needs to match your recruitment material that you're going to attach later and your consent form. We have on our forms, and subjects have the right to contact the IRB for any questions or concerns. The number one reason why we get called by research subjects is participation and the duration. So think about it from their point of view. Have you ever been in a restaurant where they told you the wait time was 45 minutes? Right? Okay, 45 minutes. We're going to say our wait, play on our phones, whatever. And it turned out to be an hour. How'd you feel? Probably not thrilled. Versus had they just told you an hour ahead of time, you might feel very different because your expectation was an hour. So put yourself in your subject's shoes. How would you feel? If you tell them it's 15 minutes, it should only take 15 minutes. It may take less, that's fine. So it's better to overestimate a little bit, but you're setting that expectation. They should know a reasonable expectation of how long it's going to take because they're deciding, do I want to stick around and participate or do I want to go on and do other things in my life? So make sure that that's accurate both here and accurate in your consent form and matches in your recruitment material. All right, so because I selected procedures involving deception, that's a special process. It gave me another thing. If I unselect this, for example, and move on, you noticed it branched and it disappeared. So that's why it's really important to get those procedures right. Often people record, let's say if you're doing a focus group or whatever, you want to record everything that happens, then go transcribe and then have that data to analyze. That's fine. You just need to tell us and make sure that you tell your subjects that that's an expectation. So answer all the questions. If you leave a question blank, chances are you're going to get returned. That only delays your review time. So answer questions and make sure there's nothing blank. If you don't know how to answer questions, you'll often find that these little bubbles here. This is called help text. So this defines a term, what is a commonly accepted educational setting, or it might provide more information. What is this? Why do I care? Might have links to the regulations. So these are your friends, these little question marks. So use the help text if you don't understand. And also on our website, we do have IRB FAQs for commonly seen questions like compensation, vulnerable subjects, informed consent, who do I list people on my protocol, those sorts of things. So make sure that you use that material. It's out there for you to help you with your process. All right, so now we know what you're doing. That's the procedure section. And now we're getting on who are you doing it on. So enrollment criteria. So you can add as much criteria as you want. Try to be succinct. You can delete extra, but if you want to add more, just save. So be succinct. If you're enrolling more than one population, you might have community participants and describe that, and student participants and describe that population. So try to, be as succinct as possible. If you don't have any inclusion, so this is basically who's going to be in your population. And then of those that say, hey, I'm interested, are there any exclusions? There might not be, but for example, if your inclusion is anyone over the age of 18, but you would exclude out those who can't read English because your survey is only in English and not in Spanish or Korean or whatever other language, then you might want to add persons who cannot read English and save that criterion. And then we get down here and select all the categories. So we are here to protect human subjects. That's our role as IRB. And so these criteria are, the reason why they're listed here is because they usually have something special about them. For example, wards of state may have a legally authorized representative requirement, and we have to go through and get state approval if you're going to enroll like foster children, for example. Pregnant women, there's another subpart. Prisoners, there's another subpart that we have to make sure that your study meets those criteria. If you enroll American Indians, for example, they may have tribal IRB review requirements. Or they're persons who are in a power imbalance situation and may be taken advantage of. So how you get yourself on this list, either there's additional regulations that are required, such as our American Indians, or generally, historically, we haven't treated them so great in the past, and so they're considered vulnerable, and we want to make sure that we have extra protections around them to make sure that they're not treated unfairly. So that's kind of how you get yourself on this list. If you answer certain things, additional questions will be asked. So make sure you capture everyone. Now, you can be a student and an adult, so you want to capture, even if one person has multiple criteria applied, you want to select all that apply. All right. So this one's kind of related to your enrollment criteria, but vulnerable populations. So these are individuals who, by either definition of regulation or through history, have been placed in a position of power imbalance. Or they have lack of capacity consent. So for example, children don't have the mental capacity to make all the best decisions for themselves, so they lack legally the ability to consent for themselves. That's why you need parent permission and child consent. Prisoners are in a power imbalance situation. They don't have all their freedoms. And so, maybe they feel pressure to participate in a research study so that they can maybe get early release for probation or extra time out in the yard to exercise or the like. Persons who have impaired decision making, so populations with mental illness, for example, again, lack that capacity. Or folks that are economically or educationally disadvantaged, we want to make sure that the research is accessible to them. We're not taking advantage of them, not coercing them by, here's $1,000 for a 10-minute survey. Okay, well, you might ignore the risks for that money, and the persons who, $1,000 is a lot of money, may be more inclined to do that than someone who makes a little bit more money. So that's what we're looking for here. So if yes, it'll ask more questions. If no, then it'll hide. If you're enrolling students or employees, again, a lot of good guidance on enrolling students. Other things may apply. We shouldn't target students just because they're convenient to us. They're just around. We should make sure that the recruitment method doesn't increase peer pressure. So if it's outside the classroom, they can do it on their own time, those sorts of things. Making sure consent is clear. If you're going to give course credit, making sure that's clear, and there's an alternate procedure. So if I say no as a student, for course credit, I can get that through another means. I'm not forced to participate in research because I want 10 extra points on my grade. I have another option. And then if there's use of class time. So again, these help texts are really good at looking at and figuring out how to answer these questions. All right, sample size. So this is the total number. You pick a number. So when you look at your IRB application, think about it as you have a blank piece of land and what you're doing is building a fence. Once you get your approval, you're able to do anything inside your fence. But you can't go outside the fence without doing an amendment. So you can't implement any research procedures that you're not currently approved without properly seeking an amendment before you implement those procedures. So if you think, 450 is nice, but 500 is better, set your fence at 500. If you get 450, that's fine, if that's your recruitment that you end up with. But if you get 501, it would be non-compliant. So make sure you really define your subject population, how many you might need, and make sure your fence is wide enough to be able to accomplish your research goals. If you have more than one population, if 500, how much is in this 250 in one class versus 250 in others, example. So if you're more than one population, define the numbers for each. If you're just 500 of anyone, you can hit none. And then provide a justification. So how did you get at 500? You can do a power analysis. That's perfectly fine. Maybe you're doing it based on enrollment numbers. You know that I'm enrolling students in a class, and typically 500 people are enrolled in the 5 classes that I'm looking at. So how did you arrive at 500 is what you need to provide here. This is a question that routinely gets sent back, so make sure you're answering the question asked. If you find yourself copying and pasting from your consent form, that's not going to work. I can read the consent form. That's in the attachment. You need to make sure you answer the questions inside the application. All right, so then we get into recruitment and screening. So the first question is describe the location and place where research procedures will occur. So if you're doing a survey, I'm going to do a survey through Qualtrics. Great. Maybe you're using some other third-party application. If it's something we're not familiar with, you might want to provide more information about that. But generally, Qualtrics, RedCap is another software that we're pretty familiar with. Any of our TAM UCC IT software, we're fine. Are you doing it in a public place? Are you doing it in the privacy of someone's home? All those may have additional questions asked. And again, I would recommend you put yourself in your subject's shoes. So I'll give you an example here. We had a submission come across where they were going to recruit women at night in a public park while joggers were generally jogging or strolling in a public park. The person happened to be a male. And I asked, well, how do you like mace? And he was like, what are you talking about? I was like, well, did you ever think about rolling up at night on a woman in a public park to ask them to participate in research? You might get maced. So think about how you're finding your subjects. They're not expecting you to be asking them to participate in research. And if you're doing it at night, you know, that might get them in a little trouble. So really think about where your subjects are, how you might find them, put yourself in their shoes. Would you be nervous, scared, ask questions, any of that? That's kind of the best way to figure out your location and your recruitment procedures and your consent procedures. So here you're going to tell me all the methods like flyers, TV, radio, student poll, phone conversations, class conversations, select all that apply, and then describe them here. We do have in our IRB under Investigator Resources a whole bunch under recruitment templates. So here's the Facebook recruitment script, classroom, I'm going to recruit in the classroom, just general advertisement, a flyer. Please use these templates because it's like Mad Libs for IRB. We'll download one here. There is very specific requirements in the regulation about what you have to disclose. It's a little bigger. So we've put that all in our templates. If you don't have these required elements, I cannot approve you. So for example, remember that duration? That's where it's here. I'm gonna check your protocol, make sure it's consistent. So please use this. It's like just filling in the blanks. Don't try to find something offline. These are here for a reason to make your life easier. So take advantage of those. You'll upload those as part of your submission packet. But here you're gonna tell me how you're gonna locate them. So, you know, you're going to send out a flyer, fine, but how are you going to find out where people might see that flyer? So I'm going to post it in the University Center. I'm going to post it in my department bulletin board. I'm going to post it at the coffee shop. I'm going to send it out by listserv, email, however you're going to give out that flyer. They're going to see the flyer and then do what, right? Click a link to the survey, click, call you, email you, hey, I'm interested in participating, whatever your processes are. So this is how you're going to find them. Once you find them, how are you going to make sure that your people are eligible to participate? So anyone can click a link on a flyer, but if your inclusion criteria is over the age of 18, how are you going to weed out the 18-year-old from the 17-year-old? It could be confirm that you're age 18. Yes, I am. Okay, then go into my consent form survey. It could be when they call you, you ask, hey, these are our inclusion criteria. Are you this? Are you that? Are you this? Yes, yes, yes. Great. Now you can be enrolled. Let's go through the consent process. So this question is very specific. So you found your people. They said, yes, I'm in. How do you make sure that people say, yes, I'm in, meet your inclusion exclusion criteria, which you've put back up here? All right, so you send out the flyer. This is a step-by-step instruction of how, where, when, so I have a flyer, I'm gonna post it wherever, I'm gonna send it out by listserv. What happens between the posting and the I consent? So they respond back to me, they call me, they click my link, get into my survey online, whatever that middle part is, this is where you tell me between the flyer went out, someone's going to say yes, how do they get into the consent stage? And then we'll move on and talk about the consent stage in the next section, or next couple of sections. All right. So compensation, again, lots of FAQs about compensation. That you can click here and read, but are you going to give things money or other things like I'm going to give away a free t-shirt? That's still compensation. Doesn't have to be monetary. If yes, tell me more. So I'm going to give course credit for students who participate. I'm going to give cash, gift cards, t-shirts, and you're going to tell me the fair market value. I mean, if it's money, it's money, but if it's something else. My favorite is I had to figure out the fair market value of a Justin Bieber poster on diabetes research for 12-year-old girls and boys. So that was fun. But tell us what it is and what is the fair market value. All right, finally we get to risk. So what the IRB looks at, the subjects and your procedures, and we evaluate the risk on one hand, the benefits on the other, and they have to be in balance. So here you're gonna list the risks. The next section we'll talk about benefits. So make sure your risk are not only complete, people leave out a lot of risk, and also match your consent form. So there's no such thing as a sub-study without risk. There are studies with minimal risk, but at the very least, you should have a breach of confidentiality risk if you're collecting any information. If you're doing surveys, focus groups, questionnaires, those sorts of things, the questions is a risk. Are you asking sensitive questions? They can skip questions they don't want to. That would be a protection mechanism. So what you're doing in this chart is telling me what the risk is over here and how you're reducing the risk from occurring. So the questions are not sensitive. They can skip questions they don't want to. The survey is completely anonymous. I don't know who answered my questions or not. That could be another mechanism. So this is how you're reducing the risk from happening. These buttons, you can add a new row. You can delete them. So each risk needs a row, what the risk is, and how you're mitigating it. No more than minimal risk or more than minimal risk, you'll select those. And then because I selected surveys in my procedures, it's asking this question, would disclosures outside of research place them at harm? So we look at physical risks, certainly, but also IRB looks at civil, criminal liability risks, financial standing, employability, reputational harm. So it's more than just physical risk. It's also psychological risk and reputational risk, educational advancement risk. Depending on what questions you answer or ask, this could come into play. This helps us decide if you're an exempt review or an expedited review. So that just means what review level you'll receive once your submission comes into the house. So think about all the risks, not just the physical risk for this question. Criminal civil liability, a good example there would be if you're going to enroll minors, for example, and you're going to ask them about use of alcohol. Well, alcohol that would be a legal risk because they're not of age to have alcohol. So that's what we're looking for there. Okay, so no benefits. Chances are it's going to be no. These are direct benefits. So how does that individual benefit? So you're saying, oh, well, this is good for society. This is good to know. That's not direct benefits to the individual. 99.999%, it's going to be no. It's important not to overstate the benefits. All right, now we get to the consent process. So here you'll tell me how you consent. Do not copy the consent form. You'll give me that later. But this is how you're going to deliver the consent form. How are you going to answer questions? How are you going to indicate they sign it, they say yes, they agree. That's what happens here. If you're enrolling minors, you need to address permission and assent. So that's a complete description, step-by-step process of the consent process. There are lots of good FAQs right here. These are your waivers. So the first one is, are you waiving the process? 99.99 chance it's going to be no unless you're doing a retrospective data analysis. To answer yes here, you should only answer yes when you have no contact with the subjects. You're not telling them about your research. You're not telling them they're being involved in research, nothing. So again, a retrospective data analysis would be the classic where you would say yes. Most of you would likely say no. The second waiver is a waiver of documentation. You're going to talk to your subjects. You're going to interact with them. You're going to tell them about the research through a flyer or whatever, but you're not going to get a handwritten signature. You need to ask for a waiver of documentation. So if we answer yes here, a new section, actually, sorry, let me answer no. No, I'm not getting their signature. It'll open up a waiver of documentation. You'll select which one applies. Usually it's this one. And then tell me why you meet this criteria. So this one has two criteria. The study is no more than minimal risk. Okay, my survey questions are not sensitive, therefore it's minimal risk. And involves no procedures which outside of research would require consent. Okay, if I'm just doing a survey and interview, I can walk up in the middle of the spine and start asking people questions. They can think I'm crazy and walk away from me, but I wouldn't have to get written consent. If you're doing FERPA or HIPAA, so FERPA is educational records, HIPAA is medical records. Those are laws outside of context of research that would require written consent before you access that type of data. This would not apply for you. So if you're educational records, medical records, a waiver of documentation would probably not be eligible for you. All right, so that's the consent process. Last section is privacy and data. So this is a question that routinely gets sent back. Privacy and confidentiality are two separate concepts. This one asks privacy, this one asks confidentiality. So let me describe the two. Privacy is about my ability to control whether I release data to you or not. Okay, so if you're asking me survey questions, maybe I don't feel comfortable answering survey 5. Can I skip it or is it required? By allowing me to skip that question, I have control about whether I answer question 5 or not. It's in my power about what data is being released. Location matters. Are you going to interview me in a Starbucks where other people can hear? I can't control that. Or are you interviewing me through Zoom and I can choose the privacy of my office, the privacy of my own home, and I can choose who's around me and that they can hear my answers. So I have more autonomy and choice in about what data is being overheard and released about me. That's privacy. So you're going to look at your location. Is it public? Is it private? Are you forcing me to give you data, or do I have some autonomy and control about what questions I can answer or not or skip? So that's what's talked about here, is about privacy. Confidentiality is different. Now that I've given you my data, right, I've given it over to the research team to allow you to use it, how are you protecting that? So we want to see that you're storing the data behind password protected devices. If you're going to record using a fancy little iPhone, right, these things have a habit of leaving, getting lost. Take it off mobile devices, put it on a desktop that's password protected. If it's in the internet, try to take it out of the internet. That's not as secure as saving it on your desktop in a password protected computer. So this is about confidentiality. You've got my data, now protect it. And how are you going to do that? At the very minimum, you should have a password protected computer, and access should be limited to only research study personnel. So if you've got a laptop shared by multiple family members, that's not secure. You needed to make sure that if you can't lock the computer, at least lock the file. All right. Will you have access to any personal identifiers? If you have it at any moment in time, even if you de-identify, you need to answer yes. So if you're going to send out the recruitment material by email, you know my email. My email has my name in it. That's identifiable. Only I have my email. Even if you later delete my email once I participate, you still have my email. You need to answer yes. Talk about what identifiers you have. If you're going to record that focus group, that's an identifier. And then describe them. Why do you need each identifier? It's fine that you have them. We just want to make sure that they're justified and that it's accurately described in the consent form. If you're doing medical health information, protected health information is covered under HIPAA, answer yes. There'll be more questions. And then how long you're going to keep the records. By regs, we have to keep it at least 3 years. So that's why that's defaulted. All right, save and continue. So that got us through the application. A little fast and furious, but got us through. So now you have the submission packet. Your lay summary is there, save and continue. Here's that application we just filled out. If I need to go back and make edits, I can click here. It'll take me back into the form and do any edits. Consent forms. So I need to add a consent form. There is also a consent builder, which is kind of cool. Hit next. If you're not getting signature information sheet, if you're getting permission assent, there's different templates in here. And what it's doing is it's taking the information in your application and taking our template online and merging them together. And continue. All right, so it dropped that documentation here. And you'll edit the Word file and then upload it here. So it kind of pre-populates. So for example, it knows the PI, it already put in the PI contact information. So once you're done, let's have the Word document will be here. You can edit it. You'll just upload it here and then it will save. If you don't want to use the builder, you can also use an existing document you already have. And again, it will just ask you to upload, click here, go grab a template I have. Computer's giving an error, I need more space, and you'll just hit save. Save and continue. And then this is, so consent forms need to be in this section. The reason for that is there's a special checklist we have to do to make sure you have all the required disclosures, and we stamp your consent form for use. Everything else belongs in here. So all study documents, that's recruitment materials, survey information, letters of support if you're going out to another location like a school or community location. Any document needs to be listed here. You could do add multiple and upload them all at the same time and click what category. So it could be a survey, recruitment material, letter of support is right there. There's always an other. And so you'll upload them there. When you're done uploading everything, you'll hit exit form. Now I sign on as PI, so I can sign off and submit. If you're not the PI and if you're students, you should not be. You should not see this. It'll have notify PI, and then it'll go into your PI, your faculty mentor's inbox. They will review it and they will hit sign off and submit. When you do sign off and submit, it's a little like this. We'll do it for this one. They click everything and hit approve, and then it will change the status. So it was blue in draft. And now that we submitted it, you'll notice it has this little guy. So it starts to track where it is in the process, and he changed from blue to orange. So if you don't see orange, it's not submitted. If it's staying in blue, it's still on your side of the fence, ready for editing. You will get notifications for when things are happening, when things are in the workflow. So when someone's assigned, you'll get a notice. If it's going to reviewers, you'll get a notice. You'll get a notice of when changes are requested. So all that will go into your Outlook as well as show up on that Investigator Dashboard. So that's a general quick overview. Are there any questions?
Does anyone have any questions?
No, I think that was very thorough. Thank you.
So, well, if you do have questions later on, I would assume you're more than welcome to reach out, and this will also be posted on our website. So if you want to go back and review anything that was talked about today, you'll be able to see this recording. But does anybody have any last comments or questions before we end the workshop? No? Awesome. Well, Rebecca, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it.
Anytime, glad to help. And our office is here for you. So if you start your application, get stumped, there is a little correspondence tab that you can send an email or just give us a call and give us that IRB number. We can look it up and walk through it together. So we do one-on-one consults via Zoom or WebEx, whatever you're comfortable with, certainly also in the office. We're located in Faculty Center, which is just behind the Starbucks.
Great, thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I hope everyone has a great day.
Thanks, bye.